Good morning, and welcome to this service of worship at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson. My name is Helen O'Brien, and I am your worship associate this morning. Our settled minister, the Reverend Bethany Russell Lowe, is out of the pulpit, and we are pleased to have Randy Springer, a longtime church member, leading the service. Our community is as varied as the blooms of the Sonoran Desert. Whoever you are, whoever you have been, and whoever you are becoming, I invite you to bring your whole self here now. We are a covenantal community, which means that we make promises about how we are with one another. In these times of pandemic, wearing masks, practicing social distancing, and getting vaccinated are all part of our covenant with one another. If you are attending worship in person with us today, our hope is that you are as vaccinated as you can be. If you are unwilling to be vaccinated against COVID-19, you are welcome to join our worship services, but we ask that you join virtually next week. I extend a special welcome to visitors and invite you to fill out a guest information card, which Jesse Hayho will post in the YouTube chat right now. There will also be a welcome table at Social Hour in Goddard, which we invite you in-person visitors to go to after service to fill out a yellow guest information sheet. We will meet for Social Hour right after service in Goddard for coffee, lemonade, and snacks. All are invited to join. Welcome. We are so glad that you are here. We have a few announcements this morning. There will be a town hall next week after the service, and the board will be here to answer any questions or entertain ideas that you may have. And the second announcement is that the quilt show has a display of quilts from the quilters group. There is a large tied quilt in the back of the sanctuary that is being raffled off in January, and maybe one or two smaller quilted pieces for sale. I can't tell you which pieces those might be, but the quilters group could. You can buy a ticket for the raffle for $2 or 3 for $5. Tickets will be sold after church or at coffee. Please enjoy the display, and if you have any questions, contact any members of the quilters group. And quilters group, could you stand up? So you can see who to contact, right? About raffle tickets and other things. Okay. And now we will have the prelude by Hong Yung Bai.
Someone came to the service this morning with joy overflowing in their heart. Someone else came experiencing despair and feeling utterly alone. Someone came for the sermon, another came to participate in the music, another came to renew acquaintances. We arrive from a variety of backgrounds with different emotions and differing expectations. Let us unite in this hour as we gather in community in celebration of the values that we share.
Will everyone please join me in our chalice lighting words by Reverend Kelly Weisman Asprith Jackson. What is this fire? A match? A wick? A flame? What is this place? Wood and stone and glass. Yet here we have gathered in this place before this flame, making each other holy by our presence here together. Now, if you have a chalice or candle at home, please light it as we light our chalice here in Holland.
It breaks my heart to ask you to just hum to the next hymn because our singing protocols with COVID in this congregation are linked to transmission rates in Pima County, and we just ticked up to high again. So we're no longer singing congregationally. I'll sing the words, and I've asked the choir to join me in singing the words to the first hymn, Gather the Spirit. Gather the Spirit, harvest the power. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our vibrant fire will they're all the same. Gather in strength, gather in things, gather in sympathy, one but then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun, winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
God's Hat by Christopher Buse, based on a legend from the African continent that he heard third hand. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead or actual events is purely coincidental. Once upon a time, there was a village with a road that went right down the middle. One day, something strange happened. God walked down the road, and she was beautiful. They wore a long, flowing robe, and on top of their head was a wonderful hat. All the people stopped to stare at God as she walked by, and they kept staring until she disappeared into the distance. Boy, God was sure beautiful, said one person, and what a beautiful blue hat she had on. Yes, God was beautiful, said another person from the other side of the street, but it wasn't a blue hat they were wearing, it was a red hat. You are wrong, said the first person. It was definitely a blue hat. No, you are wrong. It was definitely a red hat. As the two argued, others joined in the dispute. Soon the whole village was arguing. All the people on one side of the road were certain that God was wearing a blue hat. All the people on the other side of the road were certain that God was wearing a red hat. People got mad and started screaming at each other. Finally, people got so angry that they decided to build a wall that went straight down the center of the town. From that point on, the people on one side of the wall were enemies with the people who lived on the other side of the wall, and they never spoke to each other. On one side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a god that wore a blue hat. On the other side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a god that wore a red hat. Many years passed, and the people were still enemies. Then, one day, it might have been a Tuesday, God came walking back through the village. They were smiling and balancing on top of the wall that the people had built many years ago. This time, he was wearing no hat at all. All the people ran to the wall and cried, "You must settle our argument." "Yes," said one person. "The people on that side of the street say that when you walked through the village many years ago, you were wearing a blue hat. But we know better. We know you were wearing a red hat. So tell us, God, what color was your hat?" God looked puzzled for a moment and then began to scratch her head in thought. "I remember walking through this village many years ago," said God, "and on that day, I believe I was wearing my hat, that is blue on one side and red on the other." And saying nothing more, God continued to walk down the wall until she disappeared off in the distance. It was very quiet for a moment. Suddenly, there was the sound of one child laughing, then another child laughing, and another. Soon the whole village was roaring with laughter. Everyone was laughing because they realized how foolish they had been. As the sound of laughter grew louder and louder, the wall began to shake and crumble until finally it came tumbling down to the ground. For many, many years after that day, the people told the story of God's hat and how laughter had torn down the wall between a divided and foolish people. The end.
Thank you, Jamili, and you will hear more about hats later. Today's meditation prayer is taken from David Viscott's book titled Finding Your Strength in Difficult Times. Is the glass half full or is it half empty? Are you an optimist or a pessimist? Both answers are wrong because each is biased. The correct answer is that the glass contains water. The same amount of water could be overlooked in a barrel and overflow a thimble. What is the point? You perceive the world in relative terms because you grew up in relationship to other people. Your family had more or less than other families, and you complained that siblings were treated better because they got more. More meant good, less meant bad. Reality is not relative, But the way you see it is, if you feel rejected and at the bottom of life's ladder, you find evidence wherever you look that the world is a hopeless place, and you are wrong. When you have triumphed and found love, been promoted to the coveted position, you think the world is a place of unlimited possibility and wonder, and you are just as wrong. The world is neither good nor bad, it simply is. You have the potential to be good and bad. Cherish your good and build upon it. Neither ignore your weakness nor despise it. Live in the empty and full part of your life at the same time.
Our earth is strong. It can hold our pain and our joy, our love and our anger. Our shared bowl, which we use for joys and sorrows each week, is strong enough to hold the big rocks, our collective celebrations and mournings, and also the smaller stones that will be added to signify our individual joys and sorrows. We who live in the desert know that water is a life-sustaining and scarce resource. We remember those who are walking through our desert right now without access to water. We pour water from a plastic jug similar to the ones used by those seeking to assure greater access to water in the desert, like our ministry partner, No More Deaths. If you have a joy or sorrow to share aloud, I invite you to go to menti.com and put in the code 74659097. If you are here and need help with that, please visit Brian Moon. If you are here in person, you are welcome to come up to the table and put a stone into the water to symbolize your joy or sorrow. The pebbles create ripples of hope. Okay, and here are our comments from Menti. Wonderful gatherings for Thanksgiving and a joyful party for Rick with people we haven't seen in a long while. Our family has some major changes coming up, and I'm worried about how my family will make it through. I'm excited for a new adventure. Thankful for family and a grandmom's first chance to see her grandson since COVID. Joy of family and thanks for the love shared. Prayers of support for those in frontline communities suffering the unjust effects of our inadequate response to the climate crisis. I'm sad it's easier for people to believe lies about me than see my truth. For good friends and good food on Thanksgiving, Steve Kranak. Prayers for Bev on the passing of her brother in Wyoming.
My thanks to the worship committee for inviting me to speak this morning, and to Helen and everyone else who worked on this service. 25 years ago, last February, my wife Ann and I were married here in an intergenerational service on Sunday morning. Ann was teaching a religious education class at the time. 2 children from that class who were present were Helen's young daughters. The youngest person in attendance was my baby granddaughter. 25 years later, I've become a great-grandfather. The reading this morning is a poem titled "One Light Through Many Windows." It appeared in an issue of the UU World publication in 2001. The author's name is Barbara Brannan. One light through many windows in different colors shines. One flame from many candles burns bright within our minds. One life to us is given, its seconds ours to spend. How manifold its living, and infinite its ends. One God with many faces, we meet on many roads, who dwells in holy places and lives in low abodes. One earth with many nations must share a common sun, a world of celebrations, a universe at one. One song with many voices now rises from our hearts, and from our separate choices, one chorus, many parts. One light through many windows, in different colors shines. One flame from many candles burns bright within our minds. The intended title of today's sermon is Diverse Thoughts on Diversity. In one edition, this appeared as Divisive Comments on Diversity. If you came this morning expecting something scandalous, I hope to disappoint you. On the other hand, there is still the risk that you will come away thinking that the alternative title would have been more accurate. In part 1 of today's sermon, I will be wearing several different hats, metaphorically. Each one represents a different point of view. To keep the potential for confusion to a minimum, I will give you a heads up when I am changing the hat and the viewpoint. When you open an email from the church, you see the words, "We welcome diversity. We commit to undo racism and all other oppressions." These statements reflect this congregation's endorsement of the proposed 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism, which calls for us to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by taking actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions. United States history begins with the legacy of slavery. In its aftermath, uncounted lynchings occurred. For decades, legalized segregation defined life in the South. In the past 70 years, from the murder of Emmett Till in 1955 and the 4 girls who died in the church bombing in Birmingham in 1963, to the more recent deaths of George Floyd and numerous others, violence targeting persons of color has been a prominent feature of American life. Thank you. Those are the pictures of the 4 girls from Birmingham. Today, throughout our nation, actions ranging from blatant white supremacy to more subtle forms of discrimination reinforce the conclusion that racism is our foremost social problem. New viewpoint. Shirley Chisholm was the first black woman elected to the United States Congress, representing a district in New York City from 1969 to 83. When asked about racial discrimination she had experienced, she said, I've always met more discrimination being a woman than being black. Although women outnumber men, laws have been made by male-dominated legislatures. Women have always faced barriers in vocational opportunity and have received lower wages for equal work. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we find ourselves going backward rather than forward. These and related obstacles facing women are all noted before we even hear from the distinctive voices of the LGBTQ communities, who are also sometimes targeted in hate crimes. Think for a moment of these 5: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. Take their specific concerns and grievances and add them to the issues that are raised by straight women. Taking the aggregate of all of them into account, we must conclude that gender-related issues should be our highest priority. Money doesn't buy happiness, true, but money does buy insurance against the most basic forms of unhappiness: food, shelter, and access to medical care. Between 1936 and 81, the United States heavily taxed high incomes. It wasn't a perfect system, but it was much better than what has happened since. President Ronald Reagan engineered a tax cut for the wealthy. The benefits did not trickle down. The gap between wealthy and poor has greatly widened. Education has become unaffordable to many. Rents have soared. Purchasing a home? Don't even ask. Yes, there are issues that are distinctly about race or gender, but consider this. A non-white girl who grows up in an affluent suburb in a home with substantial parental income has a better chance of academic accomplishment, professional satisfaction, and economic security in adulthood than does a white boy growing up in poverty in rural Appalachia. The most effective first step in removing oppressions would be to address disparities in wealth and income. Temperatures rise nearly every year. The ices of the Arctic and Antarctic are melting, thereby threatening the viability of many coastal cities. Inland, drought and natural disasters are occurring with increasing frequency. Air quality continues to deteriorate from pollution. Human overpopulation is causing species to go extinct at unprecedented rates. This ultimately impacts humans' ability to survive. Governments around the world promise too little and deliver even less. Here are a few quotes from United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Nations are gridlocked in colossal global dysfunction. We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator. Humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish, end of quotes. The resolve to eliminate oppressions is well-intentioned. What good will it do us to learn to live together in harmony if the planet can no longer sustain human life? Those who focus principally on social justice are, in effect, trying to fix the plumbing in a house that is almost literally in flames. Some of you will remember comedian George Carlin and his shtick as the hippy-dippy weatherman. In one of his forecasts, he warned of severe thunderstorms nearby, but then added, "Our radar has picked up on several Russian missiles headed this way, so I wouldn't sweat the thunder showers." Yes, social justice will not rescue us if civilization comes to an end, and nuclear war would make climate change look trivial by comparison. Since 1945, nations have maintained an uneasy peace held together by the threat of mutually assured self-destruction. It nearly collapsed during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The peace holds only so long as the people in power are acting with some degree of rationality. This ends when any person whose finger is on the nuclear button acts out from vengeance, desperation, or temporary insanity. On any one of those three counts, Vladimir Putin could become that person. Should nuclear war take place, countless millions could die, and the fallout could quickly make the earth uninhabitable. Such a war would be climate change on steroids. One more hat. Each of the previous speakers has promoted a specific cause. They all make valid points, but they seem to be overlooking something. The foremost concern of a community of spiritually minded liberals should not be social action. Why? Operating a church is very expensive. If social action is our primary objective, the cost-effective action would be to disband our churches and give money directly to the organizations we support. The principal purpose of the church is to create a community in which our shared values are explored and our members are given support as they pursue their spiritual journeys. They must each then decide individually how to translate their values into action. There is another reason for prioritizing the church over social action pursuits. Our numbers as Unitarian Universalists are perilously small, and young Americans are showing increasing disinterest in organized religion. Addressing this or that social cause is good, but I fear in the meantime, we are in danger of becoming extinct. There is no denomination B. We must focus on what we need to do to survive.
Our offering words this morning are from Ellen Johnson Fay. The offering is a sacrament of the Free Church. It is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join with us. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values. An offering will be collected to support the life and work of our congregation. If you are joining us online, you can send a check to the office, give online at uuctucson.org/donate, or text 833-361-5796. The ushers will now come up the aisles with the offering baskets. Thank you.
sermon podcasts from the pre-COVID era, going back at least 10 years, are available on the church's website. Since the beginning of the COVID era, nearly every service is available, video and audio in its entirety. Sometimes closed captions are provided. Help yourself, they're free. I especially recommend a service from July 4, 2021 that is in keeping with today's theme. It was created by church member, winter visitor Howard Tolley. The sermon from that service by Reverend Connie Simon had been given shortly after the 2020 election. As one of our very few black female ministers, Reverend Connie is especially qualified to address the intersection of race, gender, and economic issues. If you are inclined to skip ahead, the sermon begins around the 23.5-minute mark, July 4, 2021. The positions I presented in part one constitute 6 diverse responses to the call for diversity. Each of those voices deserves to be heard. I have learned something from all of them. Of course, this list is not exhaustive. Likely you have thought of others. Threats to democracy, gun control, reform of the judicial system and drug laws, and animal rights. That last one is a personal favorite of mine, but that's another sermon for another day. Sometimes a topic has multiple subtopics. Threats to democracy include election denials, conspiracy theories, obstacles to voting, authoritarianism, white Christian nationalism, gerrymandering, attacks on public education, book banning, and the use of violence for political ends. But I'm interested this morning in taking a quick look at some of the ways in which conservatives and we religious liberals are and are not diverse. For almost all of the first 33 years of my life, I operated in circles in which diversity in matters of doctrinal belief was prohibited. Nearly all of my blood relatives continue to live there. By contrast, Unitarian Universalist congregations represent considerable theological diversity. But one consequence of this is bruised egos. During her first or second year with us, Reverend Bethany asked people to write down any area in which they don't feel fully accepted at church. Theists reported not always feeling accepted by humanists, and humanists reported not always feeling accepted by theists. Apparently, it works both ways. I once knew a Unitarian Universalist minister whose sermons sometimes confused me. Each sermon was, taken by itself, coherent. The problem was that a particular sermon often seemed to be incompatible with what I had heard some months previously. After about 3 years, I detected the pattern. His theology varied depending on where we were in the church year. At the beginning in the fall, he was full of optimism. The universe loved us in a deeply personal way. After the winter holidays, he took on a somber, stoic agnosticism. After the pledge drive in March, he became an angry, anti-Christian humanist. Then he took a much-needed summer break. That exposed me to theological diversity, even though it was unintentional. But whatever you say about our various theologies, in political thought, we are not especially diverse. There is irony in the fact that while we champion diversity, we generally expect political uniformity in practice. Yes, there are Christian congregations that have a similar uniformity of political thought in the opposite direction, but there are many others that are more politically diverse than we are. However, in saying this, I am not being critical. Here we ask you to wear a mask during the Sunday service, and if you are not vaccinated, to stay home next week and watch us on the internet. This is the exact opposite of diversity, and with good reason. Conservatives believe in diversity, but they label it and pursue it differently, replacing the slogan, "We welcome diversity," with "We exercise freedom." During the height of the COVID phenomenon, when health officials were begging everyone to heed the warnings of scientists and to take precautions, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem said that in her state, people believed in freedom-based science as opposed to government-based science. Wear a mask? Exercise your freedom. Practice social distancing? Exercise your freedom. Become vaccinated? Exercise your freedom. All of these are examples of diversity. Unrestrained diversity is a recipe for anarchy, and this is not a merely theoretical observation. In the states that Donald Trump carried in both 2016 and 2020, the death rate from COVID is per capita 22% higher than it is in the states that he lost in both elections. Full disclosure, my 97-year-old mother is a COVID long hauler. She seems to have contracted it from someone who thought it unimportant to wear a mask. She has been in significant pain ever since contracting COVID 2 years ago. Unfortunately, religious liberals are not immune to misusing freedom. I cringe whenever I hear one of us saying, "I'm free to believe whatever I want to." No, you are free to take responsibility to believe whatever the evidence compels you to believe. The essence of liberal religion is reflected in the values stated in our principles. Whether we list 7 or 8 or whatever number, for my own part, I think these values can be compressed into 3 core concepts: truth, love, and justice. We covenant to affirm and promote 1, integrity in matters of belief; 2, compassion for all sentient beings; and 3, equity in all our relationships. The rest is detail. In giving expression to these ideals, we will be diverse. Yes, we are, as varied as the blooms in the Sonoran Desert. And that is a diversity that should be respected. The challenges of liberal religion are how to forge a sense of identity of purpose amidst the inevitable diversity, and how to motivate those who claim to honor those ideals to invest themselves in this cause. It is a sacred mission.
Would you please hum along with the choir and me as we sing "Wake Now, My Senses"? Wake now, my senses, and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow, giving, receiving, as love shows us how. Wake now, my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quest for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now, my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now, my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
Our closing words are verse 1 of today's reading. One light through many windows in different colors shines. One flame from many candles burns bright within our minds. Thank you. Go in peace.
Please join me in these words of Talus Extinguishing, written by Reverend Maddie Cephantis. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts, with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in, until we are together again.